Tonight, News Channel 5 investigates, uncovers brand new questions about a Middle Tennessee congressman who has left a trail of scandal. Good evening to you. I'm Carrie Sharp.
And I'm Kelsey Gibbs. Those new questions center around Congressman Andy Ogles and the stories he tells about how he spent money from his campaign. Among the questions, why could we not find evidence that some of the companies he says he paid actually exists?
And that comes as Ogles is already facing an FBI investigation as a result of questions previously uncovered by our chief investigative reporter, Phil Williams.
Well, as you both know, under federal law, congressional candidates are supposed to provide a full accounting of exactly how they spend their campaign money to make sure it's being spent for legitimate purposes. But what we've now discovered only adds to the questions that have dogged Andy Ogles since his early days in Congress. So how did you forget what your major was in college? Over the last 2 years, our investigation has exposed how Congressman Andy Ogles fabricated large parts of his resume, including his professional credentials.
So I'm an economist.
You know, as an economist.
There were also questions about how the Murray County Republican used the stillborn death of a child to raise thousands of dollars for a children's burial garden that was never built. Congressman, this doesn't have to be a story if you can just offer some evidence it went for a good cause. And our investigation exposed how he did not appear to have the $320,000 he claimed to have personally loaned his campaign back in 2022. Ogles later admitted it wasn't true, and the FBI opened a criminal investigation. And yet through it all, hi there, this is Phil Williams. I'm calling to verify some campaign expenditures. We had never taken a hard look at how Ogles claimed to have spent money from his campaign until now. In 2022 and 2024, Andy Ogles reported spending thousands of dollars with a company called JL Tech Sales. He initially said it was located on Access Road in Chattanooga, and it was for office supplies, internet, and TV services. Those expenditures to JL Tech Sales would total more than $14,000. But when we searched that address in Chattanooga, there's a company there called Technology Sales, but you see on the sign, plexiglass, nylon, Teflon is what their services are. Nothing about office supplies, nothing about TV or internet services. Eventually, I reached the company at that address. So he says he purchased office supplies, internet, and TV services. Is that anything your company would do?
No.
And there's never been another company by that name at this address?
Oh, no. This business has been here 25, 30 years.
Our nation deserves nothing less than full transparency.
In fact, about the time that the FBI began investigating his campaign, Ogles amended his financial reports to say that JL Tech Sales was actually at 134 Main Street in Pennington Gap, Virginia. And these reports said the money was just for office supplies. And when we search for a company with that name and that address in Virginia, we come up with nothing. So early one morning, I set out in search of answers, driving across the state through Knoxville up into the mountains of Western Virginia, making my way nearly 5 hours later to Pennington Gap, the tiny town where Ogles claimed to have bought thousands of dollars in office supplies. And here in Pennington Gap, Virginia, this is 134 Main Street, but what I would find here would only raise more questions. I'm trying to verify, is there a company called JL Tech Sales at this address?
So, yeah, but that's not office supplies.
Outside that address, I met a man who refused to identify himself, who said he operated a company out of that office with a different name, but he insisted he sends its bills out as JL Tech. But you won't tell me your name?
No, I don't need to tell you any of that, any stuff, any further.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
At this point, it seemed like our conversation was over, but just before I got ready to head back to Tennessee, the man decided to come back out for one more conversation. I'm trying to get on the record. Okay, what is the truth?
So, all right, we don't sell office supplies.
Okay.
We provided for Andy texting services and ringless voicemail services for his campaign.
Okay.
So when he was campaigning, we would send out bulk texts to the databases that he provided inviting people to his events or whatever he had going on in his campaign. That's all we did for him.
The man said he did work for Ogles back in 2022, but we had reports where Ogles said he also paid JL Tech Sales in 2024. That's when the man said he billed Ogles for work that was never done and had never gotten around to paying the money back.
All there sort of is this question about why that money hasn't been refunded or reported as being refunded.
Roger Weand is senior researcher for the nonpartisan Campaign Legal Center, which works to hold government accountable.
It certainly does raise a question as to why this reporting was not being, done in a transparent way the first time around.
And the fact that I had to drive to Virginia to try to get answers, that's not how this is supposed to work.
Absolutely. The public should not have to go through that process to have complete, accurate, transparent information about their representatives' campaign finances.
In Ogles' campaign reports, we also discovered $1,100 spent with something called In a Par in Gallatin, Tennessee for fundraising event fees. The street address isn't a real address, and we could not find anyone who had ever heard of it. He also reported paying Venmo for office supplies, one payment of $520, another for $1,000, and a third payment for campaign consulting, another $2,000.
I would say that those transactions in particular are very concerning because the purposes for which the transactions were reported are not services that Venmo appears to provide.
Then there's a $1,000 expenditure to a company supposedly called Strategic Avanscale for campaign consulting. So we checked and we could not find a company by that name anywhere in the country. And when we checked the address, it comes back to a UPS store in Washington, D.C.
It does seem unusual that there isn't more information out there about the company, and it certainly raises questions that should be answered.
Another thing that caught our attention, $55,000 paid out to 8 different people in 2022 who all list the same mailing address in Washington, D.C. We looked, and it's actually an office building. Among the recipients, a Stein Erickson. We could not find anyone by that name in Tennessee or D.C. And R. Chris, we don't know if that's a first or last name, and John Smith.
That's another situation in which vendors, including staff members for the campaign who are being paid by the campaign, voters have a right to know precisely who they are. And donors do as well.
All of it raises questions that Weand says deserve answers from an elected official who has left a trail of unanswered questions. And tonight we do have an answer of sorts from Congressman Ogles' office. In an email statement, his chief of staff insisted that all of the expenditures in question are legitimate campaign expenses and have been verified as such. He blamed third-party software for causing what he called minor errors to a small number of expense entries. He added, quote, "We are working on providing the Federal Election Commission with updated information regarding these legitimate campaign expenses." But just to be clear, we asked for documentation that would prove all of those expenditures were indeed legitimate, but that's not something they provided.
I know you're going to keep following up on that part, but what about this FBI investigation? What's the status of that?
Well, so far, Ogles' attorneys have managed to keep the FBI from looking at the evidence they seized from him last fall, actually last August. We're still waiting on a federal magistrate here in Nashville to rule on their motions. In the meantime, the Trump Justice Department has taken over the case, removing local prosecutors. Right now, it's not clear if the Trump administration, intends to shield him from potential prosecution. We just don't know.
Oh, wow. Well, Phil, of course, we appreciate you, and we know you're going to stay on top of this.
Absolutely.
All right. And if you can, go to NewsChannel5.com right now. At the bottom of Phil's latest investigation, you'll find links to all of his previous reports on Andy Ogles.